A 14-year-old boy trusted his teacher and pushed through the corkscrew twist in a cave that proved too challenging for even experienced explorers. What began as a simple church expedition turned into a horror story that will be remembered by many. This is the infamous story of Kenny Nelson. On a cool Saturday morning, a group of teenagers from the Community Bible Church in Fort Smith, led by their teacher, set out for what they believed would be a fun and adventurous day at the park. Among them was 14-year-old Kenny Nelson, a boy with a passion for the outdoors and an adventurous spirit. Kenny was thrilled. He and his friends had planned to explore Devil's Den State Park, hike its scenic trails, and perhaps even discover some of the famous caves the park is known for. Devil's Den State Park is a place of wonder, home to miles of winding trails, fascinating rock formations, and caves that have captivated visitors for generations. One area, in particular, stands out: Satan's Maze, a labyrinth of narrow passages and deep crevices that challenges even the most seasoned explorers. Satan's Maze isn't just a name, it's a warning. The entrance to this notorious cave is small, almost like a mouse hole, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Guarded by a padlocked grid of metal bars resembling a dungeon door, it's accessible only to those with permits and a key. Just beyond the entrance lies the narrow corridor, where the passage immediately tightens into a space barely wider than a shoebox. Cavers must crawl single file through this claustrophobic tunnel, the wet sandstone walls glistening under the beams of their headlamps. Soon after, the path leads to the quagmire, a small hole that forces spelunkers to contort their bodies to fit through, dropping a few feet into a thick, sticky pit of mud. This section demands both physical strength and mental resilience, as the mud clings to every surface, making progress slow and exhausting. The passage remains tight, requiring hands and knees to be used for crawling, which tests endurance. The cave then expands slightly into the roomy refrigerator, a space roughly the size of a refrigerator, which earned its name because of its dimensions. Here, sitting up and catching a breath becomes possible. This is the most spacious part of Satan's Maze, offering a brief respite before the final challenge. Before reaching the exit, the final drop must be faced, the most challenging section of Satan's Maze. With its corkscrew twist and a steep 70-degree downward angle, the descent is not for the faint-hearted. The space remains tight, and the risk is high. On this day, Kenny and his friends set out on a short hike along the Devil's Den Trail. They reveled in the beauty of nature and the company of close friends. Excitement buzzed through the group as they neared the region's famous cave. Although the entrance wasn't visible yet, the decreasing number of tourists suggested the challenge ahead. Only a few decide to explore this cave. As the group approached the entrance, the teacher made the call to split them into pairs, allowing each team to pass through the cave sections one at a time to avoid congestion and prevent panic. With minimal verbal preparation, helmets were handed out, and the adventure began. Kenny and his friend were in the second group. They squeezed through the tight entrance, which was even narrower than Kenny had expected, but still manageable. After about 30 minutes of moderate struggle, the two friends successfully navigated the narrow corridor and the quagmire, finally reaching the roomy refrigerator. Relief washed over them as they could finally stretch out and take a breather before the final push. They might have joked about how easy it was, and that only a few feet remained before they would see daylight again. However, the teacher had warned them to be extra cautious at the end, where a deceptively simple twist that doesn't allow one to return back once entered. Kenny, brimming with confidence after successfully navigating most of the cave's sections, pushed his torso into the corkscrew passage. After a few feet, he began to feel pressure around his chest. In an attempt to create more space, he stretched his arms forward, a move that witnesses later said was a key factor in his becoming stuck. It was like being trapped in a water park tube, but this time it was a cold, dark, dry, and narrow cave. As Kenny advanced with his arms outstretched, the space around him tightened, preventing him from bending even an inch. Now, in this awkward position, he couldn't turn or move in any direction. Breathing became difficult. Kenny could hear his friend at one end of the passage asking if he was okay, while the teacher called his name from the other end to check on him. After a few minutes of struggling, Kenny yelled that he couldn't move and needed help. At first, the teacher thought Kenny was overthinking it and told him to keep pushing, assuring him that feeling pressure was normal and that it took time for everyone to pass through. But Kenny insisted that he couldn't move and needed help. Realizing the situation might be more serious, the teacher decided to run back to the entrance, crawl through the cave, and assist Kenny from inside. After about 30 minutes, the teacher reached the corkscrew twist and reassured Kenny, telling him not to worry, that he would try to push him through or maybe even pull him back. But after more than an hour of struggling, it became clear that the situation was spiraling out of control. Kenny, now panicking, reported that his legs were numb and he had a severe headache. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, the teacher and Kenny's friend crawled back to the entrance and ran to the park entrance, shouting for help. They needed someone to rescue Kenny before it was too late. Fortunately, park rangers were nearby and quickly responded to the urgent call. When the rangers arrived, they quickly grasped the gravity of the situation. Kenny was deep inside the crevice, immobilized, and time was running out. The rangers knew they had to act fast, so they called in the local cave rescue team, experts who had faced similar challenges before. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team arrived around 5:45 p.m., equipped with ropes, pulleys, and even grease, anything that might help free the trapped boy. A helicopter stood by, ready to transport Kenny to the hospital if needed. As they began their work, it became clear this would be a challenging rescue. Kenny was positioned almost vertically in the crevice, making it nearly impossible to secure a rope around him. Every attempt to reach him seemed to make the situation worse. The narrow space restricted his breathing, and the cold was seeping into his bones. Rescuers managed to reach him, offering comfort and keeping him calm. But extracting him was proving to be a Herculean task. Hours ticked by as the rescue team tried various techniques. The tight space allowed only one or two rescuers to work at a time, further complicating their efforts. As night fell outside, the tension inside the cave grew. Kenny had now been trapped for over 12 hours, and hypothermia was becoming a serious concern. Rescuers used blankets and even a hairdryer to keep him warm, all while continuing their relentless efforts to free him. In a desperate move, the team decided to use power tools to break away some of the surrounding rock. It was a risky strategy. One wrong move could cause a cave-in or injure Kenny. But with options dwindling, they felt they had no choice. As dawn broke on Sunday, marking nearly 17 hours since Kenny became trapped, the rescue team knew they had to try something different. After widening the crevice and creating more space in the corkscrew tunnel, the rescuers finally reached Kenny's torso. They applied grease around his body, hoping it would help him slide out of the narrow crack. It was a risky move, but it was their best shot. Encouraging him to push downward with his feet, they watched anxiously as Kenny attempted to move inch by inch, hoping he could free himself from the crevice. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew this was their last chance. Then, slowly but surely, Kenny began to move. Inch by inch, he started to slide forward. The grease helped, giving him just enough space to wiggle free. The rescuers watched Kenny's face etched with fear, his eyes bloodshot from the strain. Each movement was slow and precise, a coordinated effort to ensure his safety. Finally, they managed to pull him out completely. Kenny sat on the ground, surrounded by his friends and the rescuers who had worked tirelessly to save him. He was cold, exhausted, and covered in mud, but he was alive. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team quickly checked him over before the emergency team transported him to the hospital. Satan's Maze still has a metal anchor drilled into the rock during a previous rescue mission. tourists can visit the site, see the drilled passage, and experience the haunting atmosphere of that fateful day, a lasting reminder of the 17-hour struggle to save a trapped explorer.